Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastaksharesha Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This is a presentation on Madhurya Kadambini. This is a work written in prose, in Sanskrit. Harinam Chintamani was a Bengali work written in verse form. So this is rather a short work consisting of 8 chapters. And significant because it describes the different stages of bhakti. In Nectar Devotion we have this verse, Adao Sardata Sadhu Sangata Bhajana Kriya. So that describes the different stages of bhakti from Shraddha to Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartana Riti, Nishta, etc., all the way up to Prema. So this work gives us a nice, more detailed explanation of those different stages of bhakti. And of course in the first chapter also describing the nature of pure bhakti and its significance. So in spite of it being a rather short work, it's also quite a valuable work for the devotees. It's not a famous work like Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is considered, a foundational work. But nevertheless it's very useful for the devotees to consult this work and study it. The title is Madhurya Kadambini. A kadamba, of course, is the flower kadamba, but it's also a mass or a big ball or like that. So Kadambini refers to a bunch of clouds. Yeah, so it's a bunch of sweet clouds, more or less. Yeah? Sweet rain cloud of mercy. The work is divided into 8 chapters, and fitting the title, each chapter is called a shower because it's a rain cloud. So then we have shower 1, shower 2, shower 3, etc. Just as the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu was an ocean, so therefore we have each chapter as an ocean.
It's raining right now.
Yeah, okay. We got some shower of mercy, rain cloud of mercy, showering. So, what is this sweet cloud of mercy? It's the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Of course, we can say it's Krishna's mercy also, but it comes through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it is through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that we can get access to the sweet cloud of Krishna's mercy. And at the same time we have to wait for that shower to come. So what does the shower do? It nourishes the seeds of bhakti planted in the heart. So somehow or other we have to get that mercy for the plant to grow. So, we do need mercy of devotees. We have Shraddha and then Sadhu Sangha, etc. So the devotional association is very powerful, and from those devotees we get mercy. But then we also need the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna. So mercy is important in all cases, but Lord Chaitanya is particularly important because through him we can get the mercy of Radha and Krishna. So, he says that even by the approach of the clouds of mercy, the heat of lust is dissipated. So even before the rain begins to fall, even before you actually get the mercy, just the presence or the seeing the cloud of mercy approach from a distance starts cooling the heat of lust in the material body. So even before we get the shower, actual shower of mercy, just the presence of the Lord will help to let's say, pacify our material tendencies. And the whole universe becomes joyful, just like a riverbed which has dried up. It expects the rain to come, and it becomes joyful, expecting the rain. And when the rain comes, it fills up the river with water. So the universe is compared to a dried up riverbed, and it becomes joyful, expecting the rain of mercy of the Lord. So the whole universe is dried up because it doesn't have any bhakti. So apart from the whole universe getting a shower of mercy, Vishnu Chakravarti hopes that he will also get some of those drops of water of mercy, because he's like a dried up tree in the desert. So he puts himself in a very humble position. And if he can get that mercy, then instead of being a dried up tree, he can actually begin to sprout and grow. So in this way, we do need mercy for the little plant of bhakti to flourish. So, therefore, Vishnu Chakravarti begins by describing Krishna, because essentially in our sampradaya, when we talk about mercy of the Lord, etc., we're talking about Krishna. This says Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, though it is all about bhakti, it's also about bhakti to Krishna, because he is the source of all rasa. So similarly, this cloud of mercy ultimately relates to Krishna, because he is the source of rasa. In the beginning, Vishwanath quotes from Shruti to support the fact that Krishna is supreme. So he quotes from the Taittiriya Upanishad, which is one of the major Upanishads, and Shankaracharya has also written a commentary on this Upanishad. So in this particular work, we find the word rasa. And this quotation is often used by our acharyas to show that rasa is not something that's invented by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers, but rather is actually in the Vedas itself, in the Shruti and Upanishads. So the particular statement is raso vaisaha. The Lord is rasa. And attaining that rasa, the jiva becomes blissful. So, in other words, the Lord is rasa and the Lord is bliss. If the jiva attains a rasa with the Lord, then the jiva becomes blissful. So this is important from the point of view of the Gaudiya Sampradaya, because ultimately our goal is based on rasa, relationship with the Lord, and an experience of love which gives bliss. So here we find in the Upanishad, Taittiriya Upanishad, this a description of rasa, experience of rasa with the Lord. So the Lord is the source of all rasa. He is rasa. And of course that's expanded in the nectar devotion. What was that first line of the first verse? Akila Rasamrita Murti, which was also in the Prem Bhakti Chandrika. So Krishna is the personification, or the murti, the very form of all rasas. So that means that all rasas, spiritual rasas, are displayed in Krishna in the most perfect way. All the forms of the Lord have rasa, but they may not display all of the aspects of rasa. For instance, they may display dasya rasa, a little bit of Madhurya rasa with Lakshmi, for instance, with Vishnu, but they don't display all the rasas fully. But Krishna displays all the major and the secondary rasas very, very nicely, very, very fully. So this is the unique feature of Krishna. So therefore, if we get the rain cloud of mercy coming through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from Krishna, then we get the most blissful rasa of all. What is rasa? This is actually taken from the Nectar Devotion, the second part, the southern section, but since the topic of rasa arises, I'll give a little explanation here. So in that section, rasa is described as having 5 ingredients. So we have vibhava, sthayi bhava, Anubhava, Sattvika bhava, and Vyabhachari bhavas, different bhavas in other words. And they mix together and they produce rasa. So if any part is missing, we don't get that rasa. So then systematically throughout the southern section, Rupa Goswami describes what these different elements are. And then in the next section of the book, the western section, he describes each particular rasa and its 5 components and what they look like. So he goes through Shanta rasa, Dasya rasa, Sakya rasa, Vatsalya rasa, and Madhurya rasa, with all these 5 elements in each one, because they're slightly different. The different elements are a little different for each one. Then he goes through the 7 secondary rasas and does the same thing. They also have the same 5 elements. So mixing those 5 elements together for a particular person, then the result is a rasa. We get a rasa. So the rasa is a combination of things. So vibhava means you have to have people, 2 persons. Let's say it's a devotee and Krishna. So we need two personalities there in order to establish the rasa. And then they have to have some sort of relationship. Now the positive relationships are loving relationships, so we get Santa, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya. Then we have secondary ones, some of which are negative relationships, anger or fear. These are also relationships, so we may have a fear of a person. So that's a rasa between the 2 persons. So we may have Krishna and Kamsa. So there's a fear rasa there. Kamsa is fearing Krishna. Of course, that's not a spiritual rasa at all, because Kamsa is not a devotee. So on the other hand, we may have a devotee has a fear rasa with Krishna, but it's secondary, because in Dasya you have a little bit of fear. You may have offended Krishna or Vishnu or something, so you get a little fear there. So that's a secondary rasa with Dasya rasa. That's a positive secondary rasa. So anyway, we have the vibhava, and then we have the sthayi bhava, which we usually kind of make this synonymous with the rasa, but actually it is distinct. Because it only combines to make the rasa, but they're called by the same names usually. It's like we have Shanta Sthayi Bhava and a Shanta Rasa, or Dasya Sthayi Bhava and Dasya Rasa. Anyway, we have to have a relationship of some sort with the Lord, affectionate relationship, one of the primary rasas. Then, of course, which is what we call bhava in the bhava stage. That's the Sthayi Bhava is manifested. But if you have 2 persons and you have love, that's not enough. You have to express the love somehow or other. So you do activities. So therefore a devotee, let's say in Sakya Rasa, a cowherd boy, that's Sakya, Sthayi Bhava. So then what does he do? He has to do things to express his devotion to Krishna. And it's particular with this particular Sthayi Bhava. So the cowherd boys, how do they express their, they play with Krishna. That's one of their things. They may dance with Krishna, and sing with Krishna, herd the cows and the calves with Krishna. That's their anubhava. On the other hand, Yasoda has Vatsalya, Sthayi Bhava. So what is her expression? She cooks for Krishna. She bathes Krishna. She feeds Krishna. She puts Krishna to bed. She scolds Krishna. These are her anubhavas. And then we have unconscious bodily activities, external activities. These are called satvika bhavas. So because of the strong inner emotion, you get some symptoms which are not thought of. You don't think about them, such as crying or fainting. So we can say they're physical symptoms that manifest spontaneously without any conscious effort, because of deep emotion. It's called sattvika bhavas. It's generally 8 of them. And then we have vyabhachari bhavas. These are minor emotions that are slightly different from the main emotions. So, for instance, the devotees may experience anxiety or worry, for instance. So these sometimes go a little bit against the main sthayi bhav, let's say in Madhurya Rasa. So then the gopis get an anxiety and they start worrying. So that's called a vyabhachari bhava. There's 33 of these minor emotions. So these give a little color to the main emotion, and it gives a little bit of waves, so to speak. They're like waves in the ocean, these vyabhachari bhavas. So the 5 things combine together, and this produces the rasa for any particular sthayi bhava. So different devotees will have a particular sthayi bhava and then manifest different anubhava, sattvika bhavas, vyabhachari bhavas in relation to Krishna, and they have their particular rasa that comes out of that. So it's a combination. So just like colors, we have different colors. Basically there are maybe primary colors like blue and yellow and red, and then you combine them and you get other colors, and you get more colors and more colors and more colors and more colors. So you can just combine these different elements of the rasa, you get infinite variety within rasa. One person we combine and gets all sorts of varieties within a particular rasa, and it's always changing. Just like the colors, so you can get with 3 colors you can get all sorts of designs and all sorts of colors and whatever like this. And it's, no one can describe the infinite variety of designs that you can get out of 3 colors. It goes on forever. So that's what rasa is. Things keep combining in different ways and produce different tastes for the devotees in Krishna. So the main person in that manifests all of these things most perfectly is Krishna. So when it says rasa vaisaha, of course all forms of the Lord are the center of that rasa, but then Krishna is the ultimate form of rasa. And then Vishnu Chakravarti goes on to explain that this is very nicely illustrated with Krishna, because he can simultaneously manifest all these different rasas with different people and still be standing there as one person. So one example is in the arena of Kamsa, when Krishna entered there. And then there were all sorts of different people there. The Vrishnis were there, Kamsa was there, evil kings were there, the Yadus were there, Nanda was there, Vasudeva and Devaki were there, his parents were there, cowherd boys were there, and the women of Mathura were there. So we get all varieties of people there. And they all, when the Krishna walked into the arena, they all had they expressed a different rasa, simultaneous. So Krishna can simultaneously stimulate all sorts of rasas with different people. So for instance, the wrestlers saw Krishna as a lightning bolt. That's the first word. Malanam Asanya. Asanya is a lightning bolt. Malas are the wrestlers. So Krishna manifested himself like a lightning bolt with the wrestlers, which means that though for others Krishna is very soft. And one of the 50 characteristics of Krishna is his body is very komala, like a lotus petal or something, and if a leaf touches it, it gets bruised. That's his characteristic. His body's very soft. But when he was fighting with the wrestlers, he was harder than a thunderbolt, which is the hardest substance. The wrestlers were fighting and fighting and fighting, but they couldn't move Krishna at all. He was very, very tough. So this experience, this is like an expression of virya rasa, and fighting spirit. Krishna was completely tough against the opponents. The ordinary people of Mathura were astonished to see this form of Krishna. So astonishment is a secondary rasa also, Bhuta. They saw him as the best of males. The young women of Mathura saw him as their lover in Madhurya Rasa, just like the gopis. So the women fell in love with Krishna. The cowherd boys had come along with Krishna to Mathura, and they came with him into the arena, and they were joking with Krishna. That's called hasya rasa, the joking, comedy. And as well they had sakya rasa with Krishna, treated him as a friend. The friends of Kamsa, they saw Krishna as a punisher, as if he were very angry at them and he was going to punish them all. So that's the anger rasa is called Rodra, the angry mood. Vasudeva and Devaki and Nanda Maharaj took pity on Krishna and thought that these huge wrestlers are there, and Krishna is very small, so it's very unfair because how can Krishna fight against these big wrestlers? So they felt pity for Krishna. That's called Karuna Rasa, lamenting rasa. And of course they had Vatsalya Rasa, parental rasa for Krishna. Kamsa saw him as death, so he is completely frightened of Krishna. That's Bhayanak Rasa, fear rasa. The unintelligent saw him as a material body with disgust, which is called Bibhatsa Rasa. So instead of seeing Krishna as a spiritual form, the priests of Kamsa, when they saw him, they looked at Krishna with disgust because he had blood on his body from killing the elephant. And they thought, how can this disgusting boy appear in front of Kamsa? He's so impure. So they had this Vibhatsa Rasa, disgust. The yogis saw Krishna as the absolute truth. That's Shanta Rasa. And the Vrishnis saw him as a worshipable deity in Dasya Rasa. So here we have all the 7 secondary rasas and the 5 primary rasas represented by different persons. And they all saw one Krishna, but they all felt different rasas. So therefore Krishna can evoke all of these rasas simultaneously. Not only here, we find also when he was lifting Govardhana hill, he stimulated all the different people of Vrindavan with different rasas as well. So therefore Krishna is the very form of all rasas, and he illustrates that in his different pastimes. So then Vishnu Chakravarti goes on to discuss about the nature of bhakti and how it will manifest through the devotees. The subject matter actually is about bhakti. As I said, he discusses the different stages from Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, etc. So in this first chapter he discusses these initial things like the faith and the bhakti and the Sadhu Sangha, the mercy. So bhakti is very, very special. Krishna appears by his own will in this material world. It's not he has no cause other than himself for coming in this world. Now we can attribute causes, like Krishna comes because people are suffering, there's too many demons, Dharma is destroyed, so therefore Krishna comes. So we can say that's a reason. But actually, it's Krishna's will. He'll come when he wants to come. Sometimes there is a Dharma, Krishna doesn't appear. So ultimately it's the will of Krishna alone. This is mercy. Similarly, bhakti also appears like that. It doesn't have a material cause to it. We can attribute it from our point of view that there is a little bit of a material cause, but ultimately it's just like Krishna. He appears by his own will. So bhakti also appears by its own will. Therefore, some people will, and some scriptural statements are there, which will describe that bhakti appears because of karma, because of pious activities, because of austerity, because of knowledge, etc. And they act like some sort of cause of bhakti or preliminary qualification, etc. But at the same time, we find opposite statements that clearly deny that bhakti has any connection with any other activity. It's completely independent. So we should not become too confused by these statements sometimes, which appear to show that bhakti is dependent on something else. So we have many, many statements in the Bhagavatam to show that it's completely independent of all the other processes, like this particular verse from the 11th canto. I cannot be attained by intense efforts of yoga, sankhya, charity, vows, austerity, sacrifices, explaining the Vedas, study of the Vedas, or sannyas. So jnana and karma and yoga cannot produce bhakti. They cannot attract Krishna. So we have many statements like that. What is the cause? Ultimately, it's the devotee of the Lord. He is the cause. of the bhakti. Of course, Krishna is the ultimate cause, but then he gives that bhakti to his devotees, and then the devotees distribute that bhakti to people. Yeah? And usually that devotee is the Madhyama Adhikari, because the Madhyama Adhikari makes distinctions between different persons, although he doesn't preach to the faithless persons, and he'll preach to the innocent people. So he becomes the recipient of the Lord's bhakti shakti, and he's able to distribute that. So he's the cause of bhakti in this world. So the Lord doesn't really interfere with the devotee. Once he gives him some bhakti, then it's up to that devotee to distribute that bhakti to others. He doesn't instruct you have to give here and have to give there. He gives independence to the devotee to distribute as he sees fit. So therefore we say it's the mercy of the devotee that is the main cause of bhakti in this world. Yeah. Sometimes, of course, as I said, we have these statements that charity and austerities, etc., are the cause of bhakti. So therefore, even in Canto 10 of Bhagavatam, you find devotion to Krishna is accomplished by things like charity, austerities, homa, japa, study, sense control, and other pious activities. So, okay, these are a cause of bhakti. But as I said, we have to look at these statements very carefully and understand them in truth, because other statements say completely the opposite. So, Vishnu Chakravarti explains that one way of explaining is this refers to bhakti in the mode of goodness, where you do all these activities of jnana and karma, etc., sattva gun, karma yoga, and then the bhakti that comes out of that is a mixed bhakti. It's a sattva gun mixed bhakti. And it's mixed with jnana, etc. And if it's mixed with the gunas, then it does not lead to prema. So ultimately it's explained that sattva gun bhakti can lead you ultimately to liberation. Another way of explaining these verses that talk about, punyas, etc., causing bhakti, is that they can say that punya actually means, or charity means, giving to the Vishnu and the Vaishnavas, giving, in that sense. And vratas can mean devotional vratas like Ekadasi or Jamastani. And tapas, austerities, can mean renunciation for attainment of the Lord, which is one of the first 10 items of bhakti, to be willing to give up things for the sake of Krishna. So you can give them a devotional type of meaning as well. In that sense, okay, if they're angas of bhakti, and then they can cause devotion to the Lord or bhakti. But if they're just jnana and karma, no, they can't do that on their own. At best, they would be a mixed type of bhakti. So therefore, if we say that these are angas of bhakti, the austerity, etc., fine, then that means that bhakti is causing bhakti. So in other words, it's independent of anything in the material world. Okay, so as I said, it says Madhyama Adhikari, who gets the bhakti from the Supreme Lord, and then he is able to distribute that to other people and give them mercy. So this is how the rain cloud of mercy descends from Krishna through the devotees of the Lord. Of course, we have to put Lord Chaitanya in here also. And this is how it comes to the people in the material world. So therefore the Madhyam devotee is given great respect for that reason. What is the definition of the Madhyama Adhikari? So this is the famous verse from the 11th canto. They offer love to the Supreme Lord, so they're devotees. They have positive relationship with the Lord. They're friendly with all the devotees, Maitri. They're friends with the devotees. They show mercy, kripa, to the ignorant, called the innocent people or ignorant people. And they disregard the enemies, those who hate the Lord and the devotees. Here we have, he gives mercy to the ignorant people. So he gives out bhakti to people who are not opposed to the Lord. They're not demons or atheists, etc. The Kanishta recognizes the Lord by worshiping him in the temple, but doesn't behave properly with the devotees or people in general. So he doesn't preach to the people in general, nor does he associate with the devotees. So then he doesn't become the preacher at all. Yeah, so definitely he gets mercy of the Lord, but he doesn't distribute that mercy. The Madakari also doesn't give mercy. The most advanced devotee sees the Supreme Lord, one's object of worship, within everything, and sees everything in the Supreme Lord. So everything is related to the Lord. So he doesn't make distinctions between devotees and non-devotees and demons. Everything is devotional. Everything's spectacular. It's related to the Supreme Lord. So in this way, he sees everything is imbued with prema for the Lord. So there's no need to preach. So Jiva Goswami explains that on this level, then the devotee thinks of that prema of the Lord spreading everywhere, like the gopis see the trees and the river, except all serving the Supreme Lord. And so everything is from a vision of prema. So that devotee, therefore, because he doesn't distinguish anything in this material world, he sees everything in terms of prema, then he's not the preacher. So it is actually the Madhurya who is the main preacher. And they become the gurus, the shiksha gurus or the diksha gurus. So in this way, the mercy comes into the material world. It is not caused by material karmas or jnana or yoga or anything else. It's coming from Krishna through the devotees, and they give the mercy to others. So this is the source of devotion. There are also exceptions. So the Uttamadikaris can also be preachers. And Jiva Goswami gives the example of Narada Muni. So in spite of being on that very exalted level of prema where he makes no distinctions, he does make distinctions. And he gives out mercy to particular persons. He's indifferent to others or whatever. So he makes distinctions and he gives up mercy to some as well. So there are exceptions to this rule about the Uttama devotees. So Vishwanath Chakravarti puts great emphasis on the fact that bhakti is very distinct from everything else. It's bhakti causes bhakti, and it's very distinct from karma and jnana. And he quotes different verses to support that. For instance, in 10th canto again, in the prayers of Brahma, we find this: O Lord, if fools give up bhakti, the all-inclusive path, and suffer to attain realization of Atma without bhakti, that means jnana, they simply attain suffering and nothing else. They are like the fools who beat empty husks. So jnana cannot give attainment of the Supreme Lord at all. It's a waste of their time. Jnana, karma, and yoga are not independent. They depend on bhakti to get their results. If they don't have any bhakti, they don't give any results. And in practicing bhakti, there is no dependence on karma, jnana, or yoga. You can do it completely independent. So they're completely opposite. Bhakti is so powerful, it has to help the other processes. And the other processes, they don't help bhakti at all. For instance, we have this verse he quotes: if one is devoid of bhakti, one's birth, scriptural knowledge, japa, and austerities are only decorations on a dead body to attract common people. So the other processes like knowledge and austerities, they don't lead to any goal if there's no bhakti. So if we do karma yoga and there is no worship of the Lord, respectful worship of the Lord there, useless. You can't progress in this world, and you can't even get to Svargaloka. If you have that little bit of bhakti, that recognition of the Lord, fine, you can go to Svargaloka. And of course, that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that if we have varnashram without the Lord, we call it asuric varnashram. And it's useless. You can't even achieve a material result ultimately. So for instance, Duryodhana got in charge at one time, pretending to be the king. And some people thought, oh, a very good king, he's acting very nicely, dharmic, he's respecting everybody, but he didn't recognize Supreme Lord at all, so ultimately it was useless. Bound to fail. If you have bhakti in there, then we call that Daiva Varnashram, and it works. You can get a stable kingdom that way. And of course you can also progress and go to Svargaloka or whatever. If you jnana with no bhakti and you reject the Lord, you can't even get liberation. Which means that those people who say that the Lord's form is illusory, it's maya, it's material, they offend the Lord, so they cannot get liberation. So any jnani who wants to get liberation, he also has to worship the Lord nicely and accept that the Lord actually has to be merciful to him in order to get his liberation. He can't get it on his own without the Lord. And the same with yoga. If they don't realize the Lord, they cannot get liberation also. On the other hand, bhakti survives without any of these things at all. And it can give all the results of karma yoga, like Svargaloka or Brahmaloka. It can give the result of jnana, liberation, plus it can give things that karma and jnana cannot give. That is spiritual world, spiritual body, prema, etc. So bhakti is completely different from the other processes. For instance, we have this verse from the 11th canto. Everything that can be achieved by karma, penance, jnana, vairagya, mystic yoga, charity, dharma, and all other auspicious means of perfecting life is easily achieved by my devotee through bhakti. If somehow or other my devotee desires svarga, liberation, or residence in my abode, he easily achieves such benedictions. So without doing these other processes, you get the result of everything else. If you want svarga, bhakti can give that. If you want liberation, you can get it. If you want salokya, you can get it from the Lord. So because bhakti is independent, it doesn't depend even on physical or mental purity. Everybody can practice. Anybody in any guna can practice. The other process, like jnana, you cannot practice if you're in the lower gunas. You're not pure enough. Your mind is not pure enough. You have to be sattvic in order to do jnana yoga and study Vedanta. In order to even participate in the varnashram system, you have to have up to some category. And some people are excluded from the varnashram system. So we have the chandalas and the malachas, etc. They're not even up to the varnashram system. They're disqualified from that also. Because they're so impure. But anyone can practice bhakti inside the varnashram system, outside the varnashram system. You can practice in any state of mind, whether you're calm or disturbed or silent or peaceful in mind or whatever. You can practice any place or at any time. And all of the other procedures are very particular about place and time and purity. So you can only study at certain times in jnana. You can only do sacrifices at certain times in karma yoga. Other times are impure. Only certain places that are purified you can study. Only certain places that are purified you can do your sacrifices and whatever. So there's all sorts of restrictions on karma and jnana and yoga also. Not so for bhakti. It can be done anywhere, anytime. And particularly the name of the Lord is very flexible. In chanting the name of the Lord, there are no restrictions concerning place, time, purity, and so on. And so it's a very, very liberal process open to everyone. So everyone in the varnashram system, outside the varnashram system, can take to the process of bhakti. Bhakti also is not dependent on even faith, and it still has effects. Of course, generally we say a person should have faith to start bhakti, but the name, even without faith, has great effect, as we see in the case of Ajamil. And you can get free of all your karmas, etc. So, very, very powerful process. One on the path of bhakti, though afflicted by lust, has the qualification to begin the practice, and just by the practice of bhakti, lust and other impurities are destroyed. So you don't have to be in sattva gun. You can be in the lower modes and practice bhakti. So it doesn't require purity to start the process. One's internal purity and purity of place and materials are indispensable for the accomplishment of karma, jnana, and yoga. Deficiency in these areas obstruct progress on those paths. Bhakti, however, is the very giver of life to these paths. Therefore, all these paths are dependent. Things which are truly independent are never dependent for their success or failure on anything else. So because bhakti is independent, it does not depend on these other processes at all. It is completely free of them. So they can never cause it or in any way affect it. So in this way, Vishnu Chakravarti glorifies the process of bhakti, and particularly chanting of the holy name, because it is very, very unique and it's completely different from all the other processes. So he says it is preeminent, it's a supreme process, all-pervading. It's done in all places at all times, in the material world, from Patalaloka to Brahmaloka and beyond the material world and spiritual world. The process of bhakti continues. In that sense, it's all-pervading, totally independent, does not depend on anything except itself. Bhakti causes bhakti. Self-manifesting, yes, no other cause. And life-giving nature, because other processes depend on it to get their success. So karma, jnana, and yoga don't give their results unless there's some bhakti there. So it's life-giving to other processes as well. And why is it like this? Because it's non different from the Supreme Lord. The Lord is independent. He is all-pervading. He is self-manifesting. He's life-giving. So therefore, it's natural that the process of bhakti will have the same qualities as the Lord. So in this way, the Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur glorifies the process of bhakti. Yeah, bhakti is like Krishna. Okay, so that's the first shower. Any question there?
So you mentioned that the Kanishta can't give bhakti. So I'm just wondering...
He's not interested in preaching, really, because he just sees the Lord in the temple and that's it. Doesn't associate with devotees.
The position of the Paramdarshana Guru, one who introduced the Krishna, they are not necessarily very advanced. I'm thinking like Govardhana Thakur. He accepted the prosecution Tamni, his guru, obviously. Presumably she wasn't advanced devotee, but nevertheless she played a role in putting him on the path. So I'm just thinking whether, even one who's not very advanced may be considered Krishna, that is able to impart some sort of...
Yeah. So persons who are, let's say, in the Kanishta category, they may be a little bit bordering on Madhyama, so then they would be more interested in giving advice to people to do this or that. Sometimes it may be accidental also. They may not even be aware of it, that they're doing something beneficial for a person. The main problem with the Kanishta, of course, he doesn't really have a desire to preach. He doesn't appreciate devotees. Plus, he doesn't really know anything. He maybe has a faith in the Lord, but how to express that and to convince anybody, he doesn't have the power to do that because he doesn't know anything. He may give them wrong advice also. So if one has, proper knowledge, then he understands about devotion. He gets that from the devotees, so therefore he gets into that category of being a Madhyama.
Also, when we talk about one who gives bhakti to others, we had that verse, Brahmananda, Brahmacharya, that means bhakti Madhurya. So you become in touch with a devotee or guru, you can get that, or that bhakti as if the seed of devotion. So when someone is giving bhakti to another, how do we understand the form of that bhakti? Is it giving one's faith to somebody? What's actually been transferred?
Yeah, well, two things. One, they're actually, in order to give the seed, they have to be qualified. The field has to be fertile. Otherwise the seed won't grow. So therefore they give to those who have faith. So therefore we say we preach to the faithful persons, not to the faithless persons. So when a devotee realizes someone has a little faith, then he's willing to plant the seed there. Because there's a favorable, it's not a waste of time, he can plant it, it'll grow. So the person gets mercy in the form of getting the, let's say, initial knowledge, and association with the devotee gives them a little more faith also. So that's the mercy that he give him. And then he teaches them about bhakti, so that's planting the seeds. He tells them how to do bhakti.
Perhaps a combination of knowledge and faith.
Inspiration. Yeah. I think Bhaktivinoda Thakur says planting the seed means the person gives that person steadiness so he can practice bhakti. So he gives them stronger faith and, let's say, inspiration to practice as well as the knowledge.
Is it possible that a Kanishta Adhikari has a lot of theoretical knowledge but doesn't have practical realization?
Well, because in associate with devotees, it's very difficult to even get theoretical knowledge unless he just gets it from some books. But if he's avoiding devotees, then there's a little problem there because he's probably reading the wrong books also. Or getting the wrong interpretation of the books also, so that's a problem. So.
Krishna Maharaj, you mentioned that even liberation isn't possible without bhakti. So how does this relate to people who are following the path of the Buddha?
Oh, yeah. So, and also Mayavadis. So, actually, as Bhagavatam says, those who offend the lotus feet of the Lord fall from their position, so they don't really get liberation. So therefore, the Mayavadis who say that the form of the Lord is material, then they cannot get liberation. So also the Buddhists, we could say that they maybe get to the border of liberation, but they can't really get that permanent liberation because unless they respect the Lord. So there's a little trick there. If they worship Buddha like anything, he's an avatar of the Lord, and they give respect to him, then they may get liberation. But those who are the Buddhists who are completely intellectual and are logicians and stuff like that, they won't go anywhere because they reject everything. They're just saying it's absolutely nothing, etc. So then they won't go anywhere.
Because the Buddha, Govardhana talks about that someone who realizes the Four Noble Truths and attains the perfection of the Eightfold Path doesn't take birth again. So it's not taking birth. Is that same liberation, not taking birth again, or is it liberation?
Yeah, well, yeah, technically if you don't take birth again, that would be liberation. But as the Bhagavatam says, people may think they're liberated, but actually they fall from their position. So we have jivan muktas who get a very high state, but then because they offend the Lord, they fall back into the material world again. So they may think they're liberated, but later they come back into the material world and do material activities.
So is God not Buddha doesn't understand fully, or is?
Well, he's avatar of the Lord, so he's an avatar of the Supreme Lord.
Yeah,
So therefore he has to have full knowledge. So he's just teaching for a certain purpose to have people reject that karma aspect of the Vedas, which had animal sacrifices in it. And then because they reject that, therefore they become a little more peaceful and non-violent. And then once they become non-violent, and then it was up to Shankaracharya to give the same philosophy, but with acceptance of the Vedas. And then once you get acceptance of the Vedas, then we have Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya to give the proper interpretation of the Vedas, that beyond Brahman there is Bhagavan. So it's like a gradual process of bringing people away from karma of the Vedas, and then back to the Vedas, and then up to Vaishnava philosophy.
there any benefit for someone who's practicing bhakti yoga but who's simultaneously criticizing devotees?
Oh, well, we had a whole section there on sadhu ninda. So it's the mad elephant offense. So if we really have a malicious intent and when we criticize devotees, then the bhakti gets very damaged. And because the devotees are the main source of progress and getting mercy. So we offend the devotees, and the mercy of the devotees and Krishna just gets cut. And so we can't advance. And moreover, Krishna gets very disturbed, and then the bhakti begins to wither. So if it withers too much, then we don't have any taste, and then we can't even practice bhakti. So that's the ultimate thing if we indulge in Vaishnava aparadhas, offenses to the Vaishnavas.
He said that Duryodhana is ruling the kingdom very nicely, even though he understood Dharma, even though Duryodhana was following the Asuric Varnashram system. So for devotee, for Madhyam Adhikari, sometimes is that showing also that tolerance and just waiting for Krishna's plan to unfold, but just accepting things as they may come, even though it's not done. So for the Madhyam Adhikari, he has to sometimes tolerate other activities.
Oh, well, as for himself, the true devotee, he tolerates everything. And that's also described in the Bhagavatam. The devotee, whatever happens to him in this world, he takes as the mercy of the Lord. And he can say, it's just the result of my bad karma, and I produced the activities that gave me this bad karma, so I'm fully responsible for whatever happens to me as far as my physical body is concerned. And though the different events are happening in this world, he tolerates those, and he continues very steadily with his worship of the Lord. Because of that attitude, then he becomes a rightful claimant of the Lord's mercy. So in other words, the Lord is very affectionate towards that person for tolerating his various situations in this world, and he gives him great mercy.
So when Krishna delineates the yoga process in the Bhagavad Gita very succinctly, where he starts. So in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna starts talking, explaining the yoga process to Arjuna, starting with sitting on the Krishna grass and staring at the tip of your eyes half shut, staring at the tip of your nose, and then finally elevating all your chakras to the top of your head, where you explode at the top of your head. So it's sort of like he's explained that process, but it doesn't include bhakti, so it's just like, is that like a secret ingredient that is deliberately left out, or how does that work?
Well, in all of those, he's giving a very general description. So he gives karma yoga, follow your ashram and duty, and then, of course, even jnana, then you're doing austerities and concentrating in Brahman. So he doesn't get into the details, but actually all these other processes they arise from the material world. So, and of course the karma yoga depends on the worship of devatas, but then devatas don't exist unless they get power from the Supreme Lord. So even the process of worshipping devatas is ultimately, and what they can give, is dependent on the Lord also. And then liberation, where does that come from? The process of jnana is material, it's sattva gun. So that cannot give you liberation, because liberation is nirguna. So something sattva gun cannot give you liberation. So what is it that gives it? And Brahman cannot give it because it doesn't have any hands or feet or intelligence or whatever. It doesn't perceive anything. It is formless. Doesn't do anything. Doesn't have any mercy. Brahman has no mercy. Has no qualities at all. So it can't do anything. So the only person that can give you that liberation is Supreme Lord. He can help the jiva. No one else can do that, because they're all in the gunas, or it's Brahman, which has no mercy.
maybe people get confused about this. Like there's some verses in the Gita where it talks about people who approach the Lord, and then he gives the different, those who are pious, those who are distressed, desiring wealth, or who are actually jnanis to approach the Lord. And then in the next verse it says that the jnanis are the most dear to the Lord.
Of those four types.
Of those four types, and then it says the jnanis who also do pure devotional service. So it seems that also, like we lump all jnanis, they're all jnanis, they're all impersonalists, but also we see that some jnanis that also are devotional too.
So actually this is not pure jnana, because they approach the Lord. So it's mixed. So it's explained we have the sakama devotees who want material things or get rid of material suffering. Then we have the jnana mixed yoga, jnana misra bhakti. So we have devotees who have some jnana mixed with their thing, so they're called the jnanis. But then later on, says Krishna, the best one is the one who is wholeheartedly devoted to me, so that's the pure bhakta. So we have their different types of mixed devotees, and then we have the pure devotee, and he's the very best of all. Of the other ones, the jnani is better than the karma mixed bhakti, but the best is the devotee, the pure, one who has pure devotion. And they can also progress from one to the other, if they get mercy from the devotees. But if they don't progress, then of course they get different results from their bhakti.
So the second part is that another reason why people could see that bhakti comes from other processes is that, like you said, that they're all useless without a bit of bhakti, but it might be a very tiny bit of bhakti in their karma or their jnana, and then you see, they got bhakti from that, and you just see the majority of it is like, karma, pious activities, and they got bhakti. You're not seeing that little fraction of eating some prasadam or chanting the holy names a few times or like touching a book or something that they did. You're not seeing that, but that little tiny thing is what actually...
That can help them also, So therefore it is said that karma yoga, a little bit is a cause of bhakti, a little bit, because there's a little bhakti in it. So it can be called a cause of bhakti, but it's very indirect, more or less. And if it just operates like that, then basically you go to Svargaloka from that. You have to get mercy of devotees in order to change the element of bhakti there, which is very small, to something very big. And so we can say that in karma yoga, if properly done, we may have 2% bhakti there, because they at least recognize the Lord and they worship Him along with the devatas and whatever. So there's little bhakti there, and some of them may offend the Lord, some may not offend the Lord because they're a little ignorant. So you get a little bit of bhakti there. And now the only way that could increase is that little bit of bhakti, they get association of devotees and they become a little more interested in the bhakti. Then the bhakti may increase to maybe 60% bhakti and 40% karma. So then we get karma misra bhakti out of that. So it's bhakti at least. So that's these people that are, the arta and arta arti, the first two persons in the Bhagavad Gita. They're at least devotees, because they're doing more bhakti than karma, but still it's not complete bhakti. And then the one who does complete bhakti, fine, then he has no karma, no jnana at all. So that's the best. But so there's maybe a little bit of degrees, and it gradually can increase your karma yoga with more and more bhakti. In that sense, good. But usually it's only going to happen if you get influence of devotees, because that amount of karma is so much that you're just using it all for elevation to heavenly planets or whatever. So they're not much interested in the, getting prema. So it does requires the influence of devotees to bring them to a higher level.
Going back to the Krishna Madhurya, just thought that sometimes people have devotees have a tendency to want to preach, but then almost to do it for oneself. Not to help people actually, but to be oneself's ego or a good preacher. Is that considered a Madhyam or Kanishta?
It's kind of a mixture there. We could say he's aspiring to be a Madhyama, but then he's got these so much anarthas that it can cause a lot of problems for him. That's also described later on, that in the process of bhakti, when we're doing sadhana, then we can get these in the process of bhakti, because it does give certain results like position and possessions, etc. You get attached to those things, and then we get what is called, through bhakti we get anarthas arising itself. So then this becomes a problem for us. And then we have to go through anartha nivritti to get rid of that, practice bhakti properly. So it's not good if it continues. It becomes a big weed, then it can also interfere with the progress of bhakti. It may destroy bhakti also. Like weeds can destroy your garden. They get big enough.
When Arjuna asked Krishna who is more perfect, impersonalist or personalist, Krishna said that those who worship him, they're superior, but he doesn't say anything negative about impersonalists. He actually says that
eventually they come to me.
Yeah, eventually they come to me, and they are they're doing like good things for society, for the world, basically. It says, but those who fully worship them manifested that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, etc., the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, engaged in the welfare of all, at last achieve me. So every time I read something about impersonalist from Krishna, he doesn't say anything negative.
Well, we find in the 6th chapter, for instance, he says, better than karma is jnanis, better than jnanis or yogis, better than yogis or bhaktas, for instance. So therefore he makes a hierarchy. So he never condemns anything because they're all Vedic processes. As I said the other day, that the karma yoga is there, but we don't condemn it. We just understand it's a process to help people who don't have faith. The same with jnana. They don't have faith. Okay, let them do that until they become more detached from material things, etc. So it can lead to bhakti, but doesn't necessarily lead to bhakti. That's the same with karma. It may not lead to bhakti. You need mercy. But if we don't come to the highest process, then we ultimately lose, as I said here. You can't get you can get liberation or you can get material benefits, but you don't get prema by these processes. So therefore you lose. You're misfortunate because you don't get the highest process.
Yeah, the impersonal aspect of God is eternal, right?
Yeah.
It's the quality of eternity.
Yeah, yeah.
So if someone goes there, it will be
eternally there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
But they don't get bliss. They get
anything of non-anda?
no, they get absence of suffering, absence of karma, absence of material body, no birth, no death, like that. Peaceful state. That's it. But they don't get that bliss of a spiritual relationship.
And also another thing, that when we hear jnana, somehow some devotees, they connect it to knowledge is not necessary. But actually, in the Bhagavatam, many places, Krishna says that knowledge is the boat that saves you from this.
Well, yeah. So yeah, we need knowledge also. We need sambandha gyan, we need knowledge of bhakti, knowledge of the goal. The scripture is there. That's why we have scripture. And that Prabhupada spent a lot of time writing scriptures so that we get knowledge. So knowledge is very necessary also. But it's not just book knowledge. We study it with devotion and we practice devotion also. And then we get the right way to practice through that knowledge.
So when we talk about jnana, it just takes like
well, there's two types of jnana. One is the knowledge of bhakti, which we need. The other is the impersonal jnana, which is the Upanishadic jnana merging in Brahman. So if we get involved in that, then we go to Brahman and we don't go to Krishna. So we avoid that. But we take that knowledge which leads us to Krishna. And it's also very necessary.
Say that those who go to the Brahmajyoti eventually they fall down and they take up the non-traffic world because they don't, the nature of the soul is action. So they just lock in the Brahmajyoti. So they do fall down and then eventually go up the ladder.
Well, Vishnu Chakravarti explains that if you actually manage to get out of this body and get into that Brahman, you can stay there permanently. But most people, what happens is they become jivan muktas, and they get a realization of Brahman, they're still of this body. So if they offend the Lord at that time, or they're Mayavadis, whatever, they don't accept the Lord, then even if they get that Jivan Mukta state, then they fall from that state. They get the realization of Brahman, but because they offend the Lord, then they fall from that state and they come back to another material body. Okay. Hare Krishna.